you know, it'll happen in a couple of months, we got it wrong last time. So again, they're reinterpreting the same biblical passages in a way which suits their own prejudices and their own wishes. So yeah, I think a lot of it is intended to be wish fulfillment. But of course, if you say that something's going to happen on a date and it doesn't happen, then, you know...
They still continue to believe it in many cases. The Jehovah's Witnesses, Judge Rutherford, for example, he owned a lot of property, mentioned now, of course, but he started to issue leaseholds that would have been nonsense in a sense, because they were supposed to terminate many years after the world is supposed to have ended.
Robert?
Yes, I guess the time constraints prevented you from looking at some other aspects, such as religious and politically inspired survivalist. Also, the millennial angst has taken place long before 1999 to 2000. It happened in 1,000 of other years as well. Time constraints prevented you from looking at the Ritz mine of nonsense provided by the Jehovah's Witnesses, who have often come up with dates and hastily abandoned them. The last one I picked up on, which I thought was of interest and will soon come about, is that they stated the end times will come, but not before the generation which saw the terrors of World War I has come to die out, and there are perhaps a handful of soldiers from the First World War who are alive now. They're all centenarians, 110 or so. I don't know what the current position on the witnesses is, but one can think perhaps by 2010, when there aren't any of them around, they'll be revising that once more. But I think the most important thing you could perhaps deal with is, how do we deal with this kind of nonsense? What's the best approach of the scientific socialist when presented with this kind of thing?
Well, I suppose one way of addressing it is to point out, hopefully as I've done, that a lot of these myths, different religions borrow from each other over the centuries, and maybe again coming up with what a common origin might have been, like my suggestion that the passing of the seasons might have had something to do with it. So I think again, sort of exposing the crossovers between different end times beliefs and also their possible origins could be a way of highlighting that it's all of these beliefs ultimately come out of material conditions rather than from, you know, the word of God in the Bible or whatever. And your other point, I did sort of want to do a bit more about the Jehovah's Witnesses. Yeah, because I'm all right to say that they thought or believed that the end times started in 1914, and it's something to do with everyone who was alive then. Yeah, it's something like that, isn't it? But yeah, lack of time meant that I didn't. Yeah.
Roger.
Well, the end of the world is unlikely to happen because God and the devil are working together to prevent it. Because they both realise that if it did happen, they wouldn't exist.
To what you mentioned Kyoto in your talk, Mike, which was excellent, by the way. But I often wonder to what extent scientists and others are updating the end time scenario by focusing our attention on the problems with global warming and the environment. And that, to me, sometimes seems, particularly when you listen to the conflicting views of so-called experts, to reinforce the view in a kind of neo-scientific, neo-religious way almost, that the end time is going to be to do with the environment and how we're treating it or mistreating it. What do you think about that?
I think that concerns about the environment have, to some extent, replaced worries about nuclear war as being sort of the immediate threat of the end of the world. It seems like we as a society, we sort of need to have some sort of big fear like that, at least recently. And I suppose and as you say, the problems with pollution and climate change, that can be backed up with scientific evidence. So you could say that if you've got a religious frame of mind, that's end times prophecies being justified by scientific methods. So you could say, oh yes, here's the scientific proof that the end times are coming, global warming, ice caps melting, and whatnot. So again, I think it's people interpreting old myths and old beliefs with sort of modern eyes. And I think maybe, as you mentioned earlier, the sort of the way science can be misused, not necessarily deliberately, but that the results of science can be then reinterpreted in a superstitious way. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but...
Think about that though. If you say nowadays that you are sceptical, or at least neutral on the notion of climate change, you are certainly thought of as a heretic, in scientific circles, without any religious connotations.
Yeah. Well, that could just be because the weight of evidence is so large that it can't be more.
Can I just say, I think it's sorry.
Could you just say,
Yeah, go ahead.
wait, go on, you have to explain that.
Yes, Mike, a practical question. What kind of effect does the beliefs you've described have on these people's lives? A questioner at the front pointed out that with some of these sects there's a great deal of money involved. Do they buy the Wall Street Journal and the Financial Times and look at the best investments? Do they, the people who believe, have these beliefs, do they take out mortgages, this kind of thing? What kind of practical effect on their everyday life do these beliefs have?
I think with the Heaven's Gate group in particular, although there weren't many of them, they mostly came from quite wealthy backgrounds and mostly quite educated backgrounds. I'm sure with members of all of those extreme groups, you could maybe pinpoint something in someone's history as to why they became, disillusioned with mainstream religion, or why they felt the need to live in isolation in a commune. I expect everyone's got their own sort of individual reasons why, but it seems as if there has been some studies done with sort of the demographics of people who are likely to join these smaller groups and who are likely to have sort of these extreme beliefs. And it did seem as if it's like a fairly wide cross-section of American society, but maybe more on the slightly wealthier side rather than on the poorer side. But I suppose once someone makes that decision and moves into a commune, then everyone reinforces everyone else's beliefs, and there's probably less exposure to different beliefs from the outside world. I don't know, some of them probably ban televisions or very wary of visitors. So I think once someone gets drawn into that lifestyle, then they are likely to make lots of practical changes to their lifestyle, just because a lot of their time is spent reinforcing a set of beliefs which someone on the outside looking in would think of as being completely bonkers. But a lot of them do become very paranoid as well. I think, Robert, you mentioned about sort of survivalists who stockpile, weapons, tin food and things. And it turns into a sort of paranoia, whether religious or not, particularly about the workings of the government. I could have gone into the whole sort of New World Order thing, which is sort of semi-religious, but maybe not quite so much connected with end times beliefs.
Andy, do you want to say
Yeah,
something?
it's just to come back to the comment over here. In terms of scepticism about environmentalism,